this is Dr. Snow. I'll be creating a short tutorial video with Audacity and another with Reaper, outlining some of the ways you can edit audio to make Musique Concrete oriented projects like that for your first homework assignment, just in case some of you have not had experience with audio editors in the past. So, as I outlined in the syllabus, you can download Audacity just by typing in download Audacity into Chrome. So if I were to go and do that, I could just search for download Audacity, and it gives me a lot of options for what type of computer I've got, so a Mac or Windows. I'm working on a Mac, but it works very well on Windows as well. Once you get to Audacity to download, you can do that. The only other thing you might be interested in is downloading all of the effects for Audacity. And just let me think for a second. I think if I search within Audacity's session or website, yeah, so plugins and libraries that you can install with Audacity, the LADSPA or Nyquist plugins are the ones that I always download. And you can see that if you go to audacityteam.org/download/plugins, you can get to this page. And then it will give you instructions on how to download and install those plugins based on whether you've got a Mac or a PC or are running Linux. Okay. If you have trouble with any of that, just let me know. Oh, one last thing, if you want to export using MP3 format, it's a smaller format, you need this library called the LAME MP3 library, or plugin rather. So if you end up wanting to do that and can't figure it out, just let me know and I'll help you with it. Alright, this is Audacity. When you open it up, you'll see it kind of looks like a track editor. You've got your microphone input, and I'm using my screen capture recorder, but you could probably use built-in microphone. And then you have your output, and so I'm using my screen capture output as well, but you could use built-in output probably. If you have trouble, let me know. Of course, I'm always available to help. When I'm making a new project with Audacity, especially if I'm working with samples, the first thing to do is to drag in a sample or import a sample. So you can go to File, Import Audio if you choose, or like for instance, I have that those two folders for you guys of the 50 samples. So I'll just go ahead and go to those. Yeah, 50 samples. So these are samples that I created for a project, but I'm just kind of letting you guys use. Let's take a listen to the zipper sample. So it dragged it in. It asks me whether I want to read the file directly from here. And in this case, I will. Sometimes you might want to make a copy of that file if you're making a big project and you need all of those files to remain with the project. So that's why you get that option. I hit OK. And there it is. So you've got left and right channel to this stereo file. You've got it set into a track that you could mute or solo once you have more tracks. You could add new tracks. I'll add a stereo track just so you can see that. Excuse me, I'm a bit sick actually. But one good key command to remember on Mac, it's Command F and Shift Command F, and that kind of fits the project into the window in which you are working. So one thing I notice about this audio file is that it's very quiet. You can listen to it. It's probably a little too quiet for what we want to do. And so the first thing I like to do with a sample that's like just a little bit too quiet in general is go up to the normalize effect. And what normalize does is it boosts the entire amplitude, the entire sound file's amplitude by a fixed amount. And then it makes the loudest point, which is probably like right here, in Audacity, it makes that loudest point a very particular value. And so we can say, if we want it to be the loudest it could possibly be, I could set it to 0 dB. So that means that it's the maximum possible value. Otherwise, you go down from 0 dB. So negative 3 dB gives you just a little bit of what's called headroom above maximum if you would want to increase the amplitude of that sound later. So for our purposes, I'll just leave it at negative 3 dB. Okay, so you can see immediately it has boosted everything up. The maximum volume is like right here, so that's negative 3 dB. And yeah, so let's start taking a listen to this and learning about some of the editing commands that you can work with in Audacity. So this was me just playing with a zipper. We were doing some sound design for a dance piece, and we had the sounds in the music for the dance piece coming from the costumes of the dancers. So that's why I have this zipper file. You can do a lot of the things in Audacity you would expect. So I'm going to zoom up a little bit, and I could click. Notice I'm on this little cursor tool. I could click and highlight, and if I hit the spacebar or hit play, I hear just what's highlighted. So if I like that little clip, I could just hit Apple C, or go up to Edit and go to Copy, or Command C, and then I could paste that somewhere. So now I have another version of that little piece if I liked it. Alternatively, I could use the split command, and that's under Edit Clip Boundaries. So you could use this Apple I command to cut into the sound file. So if I did that, you can see I now have 2 sound files. And now if I did it over here too, now I've got 3. And so in Audacity, you need to use a different tool to move audio around, and you do that with this little time shift tool. So you can see now I could grab this piece here, I could grab this piece, this piece, this piece. I could even grab this and pull it down to a different track if I wanted to. But you always have to remember that that's the only way you can move audio around in Audacity. Okay, so let's just go through and find a few nice sounds that I might want to use to create some type of Musique Concrete piece. And as you probably read in my description, Musique Concrete is when you are listening to real-world sounds for their musical and potentially dramatic potential. So you find these sounds with an ear for how they might be used in a musical context. And then all those musical contexts that can occur through the use of this type of sound, or that suggest themselves through the use of these kinds of sounds, yeah, they might be a little bit different than what you would write if you had a piano and a flute around. Okay, so that's another kind of nice little sound. So I'll copy it, I'll paste it down here. I can zoom in and out with these tools. I kind of like that little tink. Copy it, flip it over here with our others. Okay, so I'll shake, that kind of shake sound. Is there one more maybe? Okay, kind of like that a little bit too. Okay, so now I have 2 tracks. I'm not planning to use anything else from this track at the moment, so I'm just going to sort of mute it, and I'll be looking at this track down here primarily. I can highlight all of those and click this fit selection tool, and now it fits the length to what I've highlighted, which is nice. So go back to the beginning, and let's listen to the little clips that I've selected. Okay, so I noticed one thing about at least the last one. So let's listen to the very end of the last one. It may not come through on your headphones, but let's listen to it. There's a little pop at the very end of the sample. And so one thing you are always thinking about in digital audio is trying to keep the listener inside the illusion that you're trying to create, perhaps. And in this case, I'm not trying to give away or make reference to the fact that I'm using Audacity to edit this audio. And so I would rather not hear little artifacts of the editing process. And so right now, that little pop at the end and probably at the beginning of these samples is an artifact of the process. And so one way you can make sure you get rid of that kind of stuff is to highlight the very end of samples, go up to Effect, and apply a fade out. And then similarly, the beginning of samples, you can highlight and apply a fade in. And so listen to the beginning of it. Okay, it seems to kind of emerge from nothing, and then listen to the end. Perfect. It seems to kind of disappear naturally. So that's a good way to kind of work on your samples initially, just to make sure there are no clicks and pops when they come in and out. Now, if you're making glitch music or something like that, that kind of elevates those artifacts to a material state, you might be doing the opposite, like amplifying them or something. But let's listen to all of our samples and see which ones might need a little bit of work. They all sound pretty good. The one thing, though, is that they are all, except for this one, fairly quiet again. So I'm going to double-click each one of them individually and apply that normalization process to it, except for that one. Okay, let's listen again. Okay, so notice by normalizing, I've actually made some of the pops a little worse. So I'm just going to go in and do my little fade ins. And first I'll do fade ins for all of them, because you can repeat an effect by using a particular key command, Apple R. Made a new fade in there. Make another one here. Another one there. And then the last one. Okay. So now I need to do my fade outs. It might be too short, we'll see. It's better if you go testing along the way. I'm just kind of moving fast. Oh, so maybe one thing. Yeah, that kind of needs all of that space, actually. So I'll make a longer fade out on this one. And I'll listen to it. That's okay. Not perfect. I would probably actually make a really long, relatively longer fade out. See if that helps it a little bit. That's better. Okay, let's do the same thing on this one. Oops, hit the wrong button. Undo. Okay, Apple R, not Apple V. So copy paste is Apple C, and then paste is Apple V, just like in a word processor. Repeat my fade out, Apple R. Okay, and let's give a listen. Okay, not bad. There's a little bit of noise in the background of that sample, but I think that we'll deal with it for now. So now I want to kind of start working with these and thinking about how I can change them in various ways. So in addition to moving them around, cutting them up, maybe repeating them, using copy-paste, I can apply an envelope to the sample. So for instance, this first one is pretty short, but let's take a look at it. So when I use the envelope tool, I have these blue lines at the top and bottom of each of the channels, so left and right channel of the stereo track. When I change this envelope, it will be applied to both channels at the same time. So the way that works is you use this envelope tool, you get these two little teeth, or pointers, and you click and you create a node. So I can make, two nodes, for instance, that I can now drag around if I want to kind of change the shape of that file, or the amplitude shape of that file. And you can see it automatically kind of creates this curve. So let's hear what that sounds like. So it kind of has this rhythmic sound now that it had a little bit of that before, but it has been emphasized a bit. Let's go back, undo that, so you can hear. I'm just moving those little nodes that I created back to their original positions. You can hear the difference in what I created. So if you're going to be working with samples, but you might repeat them, it's good to kind of keep a copy of those around. So notice that when I change that envelope, like I did a bunch of things to it, for instance, if I were to then copy-paste that and put it somewhere else, it's going to have the envelope on it again. And I might not want the same envelope the next time. So what I like to do is kind of keep things organized in terms of what's my material that I'm using and what is my actual session, like what is my piece, kind of like a palette and your painting. Your paint palette is where you store the colors that you're working with. So in that case, I'll take this, copy, stick it over there. So now I've got each of those twice. And every time I want to use one, I can then just drag it down into the session that I want to work with. So now I'll mute this, but I can take one, even when it's muted, and put it down here. Okay, so now I like that little moment that I was creating. Drag this up so it's a little smaller, this a little larger, put this over here, double click, and zoom in on it. Start at the beginning. Recreate that envelope. You can see it actually copies the envelope for you. So I still have those little nodes that I had made in the composition, or in the clip. Okay, so now let's listen to our beginning. Okay. And let's make ourselves a new track. Use a little larger screen. Use my fit. Shift Apple F. Let's see. So this one. I think I want to come next, copy it, and place it right here, paste. I think I want this one right here. And I'm going to delete, or actually I'm going to split this track, or this clip right here. So move this piece over, I'll probably use it later. Create a little fade out, create a little fade in, zooming out a little bit, and then let's take a listen. So I kind of like the way this sort of opens up the space for me. It kind of creates this expectation, and then this sort of follows. It's like you're opening a door, and all of a sudden this is what walks through the door. But it kind of goes on a little too long for me. So I think I will have it actually kind of stop right here. So I'll split it again. And I want this sound to kind of sound like it creates an ending for this sound. Let's see if I've done that correctly. Not bad. This is a little bit late, I think. Yeah, so I really want the end of this sound to coincide with the beginning of this sound. If I zoom up a little bit, I can kind of stick it there. Yep, that's good. And then this one as well needs to coincide really well with the end of that sample. Good. Okay, so what else do we have in our material that we're working with right now? Okay, this almost has like a footstep in it that I can hear. And then I'll unmute this and listen to this sample again. So I kind of like this, but I might kind of turn it into something that almost produces a rhythm for me in some capacity. So I'll drag these over. They're not part of the composition right now, but I'm going to take this guy and start working with the beginning of it. Like this, you know, that kind of sound. So I'll split, and then I also like this how it changes here. So I'll split this one too. And then I think what I want to do is make something that kind of goes back and forth between these two sounds, but kind of changes their relationship each time I hear them. So let's listen. It's like this. So I could get in there and be nitty gritty about the fade ins and fade outs, but for right now I think I'll just kind of continue to work quickly. So I'll take this one, I'm going to have it repeat a few times, and then remember I have a copy of this over here. I'm going to bring it back. So I've got it to work with. Should I want it? And I think actually I'll just double click Apple C for copy. I'll put my version of it over here. And so notice I put a little more space between each of these each time it comes around. And what I'll do is I'll take a different length of this other sound file each time I work with it. So I know I took about that much. That's a little more than I took last time. So copy that. Here. And then I'll do the same thing, but I'll stretch its relationship to this one this time. And then this last time, I'll take more of the whole thing, like all of the rest of it. And I'll also have it enter just a little bit earlier. and then this is not really part of my composition anymore. And so I think I'm going to want a little bit of a trigger sound each time this comes back in. But let's just see what happens when we listen. Oops, gotta mute this track. That's all right. It's not developing maybe in as interesting a way as I might want it to, so there's a little more kind of adding to it that could probably be done. But it is changing just a little bit each time, and that's one thing I really like. I like not to use too much exact repetition. So like the relationship of it coming in the middle is sort of slowly shifting over, and then additionally, where it comes, this one enters is kind of moving this way. Oops, I needed to move this one a little bit. So that the distances are changing, basically. And so another really kind of cool effect, I'll add another stereo track here. And I'm going to take this little sample, and I'll put it right here for now. But I want to use the reverse of this sample. So up in Effects, I can go down to Reverse, and I get that one backwards, so I'll solo it. Kind of a nice entry sound, perhaps. And I'm going to use that to kind of create this initial transition each time. So I'll take it and I'll put it here, copy that, use my placement cursor tool, and line it up with this sample again. Same thing here, same thing there. And then I'm going to put one more over here, and you'll see why in just a second. Okay, let's fit. So actually, let's highlight and fit. Okay. So, okay, so just one last kind of decision that I'm making. I think it repeats too many times, so I'm going to get rid of this guy, this guy. Just pull this one here. So, we won't need that anymore. Okay, so here's another cool effect that Audacity has that's really nice. I could just highlight this one file here, and it has this really nice time stretching capability. You can change the pitch of a sample, change the speed of the sample, or change the tempo. When you change the pitch, it actually doesn't change the timing. That's the way the change pitch effect works. But if you change the speed, this is going to change the timing and the pitch at the same time. So if I were to slow it down by half, that's actually going to lower the pitch by an octave. So if I listen to that, it kind of creates this other type of interesting sound. There's also this kind of more macro stretcher called Paul stretch, and so I could stretch it out by 10 times without affecting the pitch if I wanted to. So this has created this really intense sound. Very, very intense. And that sound needs some editing to become useful, perhaps. So like we've got our fade ins again and our fade outs again, like so. It's also a bit loud, so I could lower the volume like this, or highlight it, effect, amplify, and bring it down by, say, 6 dB. Like so. So that's kind of a cool sound that I could use in the background if it were even quieter probably, and maybe longer fade out. A bit more tweaked fade in. And double click to get back to amplify. I'm going to bring it down another 10 dB. It's going to be very quiet. Have that kind of sneaking in here at the end. So you can hear how you could use that perhaps with some reverb and make some kind of nice atmospheric sound. Now notice every time I apply an effect to a clip, it changes that actual clip, and so I can go back and undo them one at a time, but I can't go back and say I want to change the thing I did 5 moves ago. It doesn't work that way. So like if I wanted to go back and use this before I put in those fade in and fade outs, impossible basically. So that's one limitation of Audacity that you just have to work with. So I'll show you one last thing. Let's say you wanted to use some echo on this little sound. Audacity has a nice echo, and I'll kind of have it decay over a longer period of time. So the decay factor is what you're multiplying the original sound by, its amplitude by, every time it repeats. And this is the timing factor in seconds. Okay, so you can see it has changed it. Let's listen to what it sounds like now. So there is an echo there, but it's not allowed to kind of play out the way you would expect an echo to. And that's because in Audacity, it only acts on the clip itself. It doesn't generate extra audio when you apply an effect. So I undid that. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor right on the back edge. Then I'll go up here and go to Generate Silence. And I'll make 20 seconds of silence. Okay, and so now I'll highlight all of this little spot, and I'll go up to Edit, Clip Boundaries, and Join. And now I have a sample clip with a very long piece of silence at the end. So if I go back and do my echo, you can see it's got space to actually decay. So let's hear that now. And it goes for a pretty long time, because you're only decreasing the amplitude by a little bit each time. Okay, that's not bad, but okay, I kind of like that sound. What if I were to reverse that echo? This is a very tried and true technique. Oops, reverse. And then I'll make myself a new stereo track. And take this and have it fade in from the beginning. And I think I'll cut some of it off first, give myself a longer fade in. And kind of tweak these just a little bit, maybe. This is probably still too long, but let's give it a listen. And I might do something here, let's see, like change the, I think it's still too long, so I'm going to cut some more off of it. Give myself another fade in. Then also change my amplitude a little bit to emphasize that fade in, and then cut it really quickly at the end. So it kind of produces this expectation. And I'll just stick these on right at the end so they all kind of happen at the same time. So, you got something you can work with there. Uh, let's say you like this. It kind of has a distinct beginning. It has this middle section, a kind of break almost, but is a break created from sound that has been kind of hanging around in the background since the beginning, and then a little bit of a cadence with these sounds at the end. So it has a little bit of a form. So if I like this, I can highlight these 4 tracks, keep these muted, and go up here and say export selected audio. And it's important that you use selected audio because if you do export audio, you actually export the entire range that all of your audio was stretched out to. So you have 29 seconds instead of 14 seconds. So selected audio. I like to use WAV files. I highly recommend them. They help with just being able to be played on every device. Some things can't do MP3, some things can't do FLAC, some things can't do AAC. Everything can do WAV, basically. 16-bit is good. It's kind of CD quality. I like the 32-bit. That's the highest possible quality. For the final version of a piece, usually 16 or 24 is fine. But if you're going to use the audio later for any kind of additional editing, it's best to keep it at 32-bit if possible. So I'll put this in our Audacity session on the desktop. Actually, sorry, I forgot to teach you one thing. So it's always good to save your project, and it will ask you to make a place for it to be saved. So I'm going to make a new folder on my desktop called Audacity 2, and we'll just call this zipper session. Say OK. And then now I will export the selected audio, put it in the zipper session, call it zipper session, use the WAV 32-bit, hit save. Okay, and so now that's ready to go. So if I were to say open a new session, go over to my desktop, look inside Audacity 2, find that file that I just created, put it here. Yeah, okay, so let's read from the original, it's fine. And you can see I've made a 2-channel mixed down version of those tracks that we had before. And so now I could work in all kinds of ways using this sort of macro thing. Like let's say I like this, oops. And this from my new session. And I make myself some stereo tracks. Or let's say I like the whole thing. But I want to hear the whole session reversed and played at the same time as this other bit, so that it's all possible with this kind of macro editing world. Let's just hear what that sounds like. A bit chaotic, but I guess the idea is that it's very flexible. And you could do with it what you want. So I hope that's been a good introduction to using Audacity. There are lots of other things you can do with Audacity, but in terms of getting the Musique Concrete project going, if you're not experienced, that should give you some ideas for how to go about doing some editing. And I'll be making the Reaper tutorial in just a moment.